Cell phone management. What an important issue now. We are really heading for a crossroads regarding electronics and the human brain. All of you that are listening to me right now know that this is the case. So we have to manage it for ourselves and our children. Cell phone management. You've seen the statistics. The average teenager now is spending somewhere around 9 hours a day on their cell phone, 5,000 hours a year, whatever the numbers you want to look at. It's impressive and really dangerous. We know that having your brain stuffed in a phone all day long will never take the replacement of this, running around. The way that the human brain activates and reaches its epigenetic potential is by moving our body a lot in the gravity environment. And every time we're on our cell phone like this, in terrible positions for our spine, not moving our body, and that lighted screen, which you've all heard the science about and so forth, it's inhibiting brain development. It's a contributor, not the cause, but a contributor to the attention deficit, the ADHD, the focus and concentration issues that we're having, and so forth. We have to change that with good management. Good management means making sure that cell phones are not going to replace any exercise. Cell phones is not going to lead to mindless eating and snacking, usually on bad things, which contributes to additional problems. Okay? So, if you're watching this and you don't have kids, then manage your smartphone for yourself. Have periods of time where you're shutting it off. If you have kids, hopefully I'm catching you early enough. So if you have really young children or kids in the future, whatever it is. Number one, delay the introduction of electronics. The longer you wait, the better it is for brain development. If you imagine for hundreds of generations and thousands of years of human evolution, it was all about movement and motion and human interaction and talking and discussing and exploring and getting yourselves dirty and running around and hurting yourselves and all that kind of stuff. It wasn't electronic screens. And it is starting to come out now. The really good scientists and doctors and so forth, when we see early introduction of lighted screens to the human brain, it's not developing appropriately. So delaying the introduction. Some of my parents that are coming in to see me have delayed giving the child a smartphone. Some are delaying that into middle school. Some are even delaying it into high school. And I think that that's a really good idea. I believe that school systems need to play a role here as well. And maybe there are situations where the cell phones are just simply not allowed in schools. I think that that would be something to discuss about. I know as soon as I say that, we're in current times right now here in 2018. Well, what if there are emergencies and we need to communicate immediately with each other and so forth? We need to navigate our way there. But we also have to stop cell phones being distractions in classrooms and so forth. Okay? So delaying introduction is easy. Then when they are introduced, they come introduced with parameters on them. Okay? So when a child is given a smartphone, as an example, whatever the electronic device, I'm just going to say smartphone from here on out, then you have to lay down a contract. It's going to be a certain amount of time per day, including weekends, and I'll get into that in a moment. So it might be that you get an hour a day when you're 14, as an example. I'm just picking it up, picking a number, an hour a day. Now, Susie might complain to you that, well, my friend Nicole can use her cell phone all day and night and throughout the night, and she gets to keep it with her in her bedroom and so on and so forth. And the parent might have to step up and be the parent and say, well, that's Nicole, that's not what we do here. Okay? So you just have to step up, lay the parameters, and it's going to be X amount of time. Okay? As the child gets a little bit older, you might consider having a written contract. And the written contract that I've talked about prior in my show is, if you do this, then you keep that. If this is not met, then you lose time. Okay? So some of the parameters would be, and a lot of parents are doing this, is children have to turn in their cell phones, depending on the age. It might be age appropriate. It might be 7 p.m., 8 p.m., or 9 p.m. if they're a little bit older, maybe. But there will be a time where the phone is turned into the parent. okay? It might be earlier for younger kids, a little bit later for kids that are a little bit older. Now keep this in mind, you want to do that on the weekend as well. I have had many parents that really regret the decision of allowing kids to have their cell phones continuously throughout weekends. Because what happens there is the kids are on their phone at 2 a.m. And at those very formative teenage years, when we're once again trying to allow those neurons and those pathways and those circuits develop, we need rest. And if rest is interrupted by the buzzing, lighted, noisy cell phone, it's going to be checked because it fires that dopamine. We know that the dopamine is just like gambling and alcohol and any other addictive behavior. The cell phone, the smartphone, has been grouped into that same addictive behavior of releasing dopamine with the other types of things, tobacco and so forth. Now in this country, we regulate by age tobacco, alcohol, and gambling. And maybe a little bit of those things, maybe not tobacco, maybe not any of that, but maybe a little bit of those things is okay, but we know a lot is not because certain brains get addicted to that, and there we go. So we regulate, or at least try to regulate those other things, particularly by age, but we don't with smartphones. And we know it's the same reward center in the brain that releases dopamine. That's why we're all addicted. And as Simon Sinek likes to say, if you wake up and the first thing you do before you greet your spouse and say hello and good morning is you check your cell phone, we've got a problem here, Houston, right? So we need to check in with that and as adults also manage that. One of the things that Simon Sinek recommends, and I've done this as well, is we as adults, we power the cell phone overnight out of the bedroom. Really great idea. Because if you get up in the middle of the night and you go to the bathroom and you come back and you're kind of not really ready to fall asleep and you see it over there, you might say, you're not saying this, but your brain is, I need some dopamine. Who has sent me a text overnight? What have I missed? And so on and so forth. Take that out of the lives and there you go. Same thing with your kids' phones. Make sure that they're in a secure location so the kids won't get up and then go to the dining room where they're being powered up and go check them and so forth. You know what I'm saying, okay? So watch that. They might need some carrot and stick. Well, some of you might be watching this and saying, okay, too late. Teenagers got the phone, can't pry it out of their hands. What do I do? You're going to lay out a contract. And remember that you're probably paying for the cell phone for that child. Okay? So then you have to lay down some parameters. You need to sit down, not at a time that's really when you're maybe challenged with the situation that's going on, but you present this in a time which things are a little calmer and a little more serene. And you say, look, I'm here for your best interests. We're having trouble in classes. You're not having the athletic performance that you want, probably because rest is interrupted and so forth. Let's see if we can work together and rein this in. Then you develop a contract. We will allow you to keep your service if you turn it in at 9 p.m. On weekends, maybe it's 10 p.m., something like that. Again, they can't keep the cell phone overnight on the weekends because they will be up. I have parent after parent telling me they got up at 3 in the morning and they can see the light on in the kid's bedroom. Okay? So you have to reel that in, and that's for their own greatest good. What do we all want as adults? We want our children that are coming up to develop into the best version of themselves. To develop in their best version of themselves, we have to let their brain develop. We let their brain develop by not having extra time on a lighted screen. We get their brain developed by appropriate rest, and we make sure that they run around and get plenty of exercise. In addition, we have to allow people to get the skills of interpersonal relationships with friends, with peers, with teachers, with other adults, and so forth, instead of burying in the cell phone. All of us as families probably should set up a rule when you're at dinner and people are there, even if you're out with your friends, cell phones get shut off. What some people do, and Simon Sinek has recommended this too, is if you go out as a group, one cell phone is taken, not everybody's, in case you need to call an Uber or take a picture of your meal or something like that, right? Or there's an emergency or the kids might need to get a hold of you, whatever it is. But just really start to reconnect with people and develop that human interaction. That's a couple of things that needs to be done. With athletes, I'm working with some high school students right now. They're skilled athletes, and they're actually looking to go to college, possibly with a scholarship at their athletic abilities. So I will oftentimes question them, are you getting enough rest? Now I'm going to take you quickly back to when I was in high school in the 80s. I got myself a job because I had to get the car and fund the car myself and so forth, so I needed some money to do that, and I got myself a job. That definitely cut down on my sleep and didn't allow me to develop into the best academic performance that I could have had, and also athletic performance. Looking back now, if there was a way that I could have done that without having to work when I was in high school, that would be a tremendous thing. I know not everybody's in that situation. I know some of you need to work. But just taking a look at that from an athletic standpoint, we need rest. Smartphones are going to interrupt that. If we have that smartphone in our bedroom, it will get checked, unfortunately, and that will be a problem. That's going to interfere with school, academics, performance, athletic performances. So we need to do that. Just before I got here to do the show today, I had this suggestion given to me is, at times during the day when I need to take a break from the smartphone, I'll set it on airplane mode. Set it on airplane mode so all that incoming stuff is limited. That's a great thing to do. What I also recommend is go to YouTube, type in Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, Simon Sinek Millennials. And you'll come to that video. It's 15 to 18 minutes long. And he'll talk about some of these issues that I talked about today and some solutions for you as well. And he'll make the recommendations of turning off the phone when you're together with the family, the phones are off, and so forth. Remembering back to those contracts too, sometimes the contracts with teenagers that are old enough to understand contracts, and you need to pull that back in a little bit. Sometimes you need to pull in the carrot and the stick. The carrot might be if you turn in all of your homework on time and you get full credit, you get your cell phone on the weekends till 10 p.m. instead of 9 p.m. or Saturday night till 11 p.m. Something like that. So there's a little carrot built in, but then you need some stick. The stick is, if you get a C or a D, or if you get a 0 on any of your homework, you lose your cell phone for a week. You just simply shut off the service. Okay? Sometimes you need that DEFCON 5 kind of activity to limit that. Now, it's all for our greater good. I do think we're unfortunately at a crossroads with brain development. We have to see some of this navigation change. We're seeing so many of these mental disorders in the country lifting in our kids and in adults with anxiety and depression and all these other diagnoses, which are then tend to be heavily medicated by these medications that really have a tremendous amount of side effects. And you need to look at these psychotropic medications very carefully before you engage with them for yourself and for your kids. Look at the side effects. And then also, unfortunately, look at some of the really egregious, terrible events that have happened in this country over the past 10, 15, 20 years. And if you look at the people involved, you'll see that almost all of them are having diagnosed mental conditions, and almost all of them are on medications. So we have to piece this puzzle together. I'm not blaming electronics for this. I'm not blaming smartphones for this. But it is one factor. So we need to limit and manage cell phones more appropriately. I'm Dr. Scott Fuller.